You are listening to another Discovering New Horizons podcast featuring Dr. Jim Polakof. Today's guests for this Body, Mind, Soul episode are former Congresswoman and Chairman of CADCA, Mary Bono, and General Barrye Price, the President of CADCA. As always, each podcast episode is a search for the truth and how it applies to our daily lives and well-being. Now here to take you on this New Horizons journey is our host, Dr. Jim Polakof.
Yes, this is Dr. Jim Polakof, and thanks for joining me once again as we explore what's important to your health, happiness, and well-being. The opioid epidemic has been described as one of the greatest mistakes of modern medicine. More than 1 million Americans have died due to the greed, corruption, and indifference that caused people in the United States to consume 80% of the world's opioid painkillers. Big Pharma is the villain in the story, and these companies are paying for their crimes to the tune of $26 billion. These settlement monies are being distributed to communities throughout America, but I question whether money spread to local governments is what's needed to save Americans who are dying every day from opioid addiction. There's no one better qualified to respond than my two guests for this episode. As a member of Congress, Mary Bono began grappling with the opioid epidemic early on. The Washington Times described her as the embodiment of American womanhood after she became chairman of the U.S. House Commerce Committee and first ever chairman of the Women's Policy Committee. Today, Mary is a powerful advocate for addiction prevention, treatment, and recovery. She's at the forefront of the nationwide fight against prescription drug abuse, which impacts millions of teenagers. Again, millions of teenagers. Currently, Mary Bono is the chairman of CADCA, the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. Joining Mary is the president of CADCA, General Barrye L. Price, Ph.D. General Price's distinguished service to our country is enormous. His military awards ranged from the Distinguished Service Medal and Bronze Star to the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. Then, as he moved into the private sector, General Price's problem-solving abilities and his leadership qualities have continued to save America. Today, he leads an effort to give states in America credible solutions to fight drug addiction and the opioid crisis. And he does this through community-based coalitions, which are essential in CADCA's mission to build drug-free communities. Welcome to Discovering New Horizons, the Honorable Mary Bono and General Barrye Price. It's an honor to have you both with us.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I look forward to the interview. So let's get to it.
Glad to be here, James. Thank you.
You're welcome. In any case, we're going to begin with you, Mary. You co-founded the Congressional Drug Abuse Prevention Caucus, and now since you've retired from Congress, you chair CADCA. So tell us a bit about what got you into this fight to prevent drug addiction.
You know, James, it was long ago, and it was obvious in my congressional district that there was this burgeoning epidemic that was happening. I was seeing it. My kids were in high school. We were seeing it with their friends. And to tell you the truth, my son became addicted to OxyContin while he was in high school.
Oh.
So I met more and more parents who were in the same position that I was. And I started screaming from the mountaintops that this is a problem. It's about to hit us square in the face. And most people in Congress, you know, Congress is funny. They take the money as long as they can until they find out that they've hit something wrong. And that was really the case with the opioid epidemic. Members of Congress were so slow to wake up and to pay attention. So I've just been focused on it. And I used to say in Congress, there are things that you do and things that you are. And this is just one of the things that I am.
Well, there's quite a bit of lobbying that went on as well, and I'm sure that delayed certain things from taking place that should have happened earlier.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, some members are even remorse about that, and they admit that this was happening. And they look, this opioid epidemic is so strange in that it doesn't really affect people until it affects them really hard and totally hits their family. Until that point, so often they're kind of saying, not me, not my family, not my
Mhm.
problem. And then they wake up, get this wake up call that, yeah, this is hitting every town in America, every region in America, north, south, east, west. You can't escape it. So, but back then I was definitely sort of tilting at the windmills and trying to raise the awareness. And, it happened when I left Congress. I was approached by CADCA immediately. I lost my election, which wasn't a lot of fun. But I think the day after or 2 days after, the then drug czar for President Obama called me up and he said, Mary, you've got to join the board of CADCA. So I was happy to join them. While I was in Congress, I worked very closely with CADCA. I was very impressed with their work and their passion and their professionalism. So, again, this is sort of a match made in heaven for me because it's what I love. It's a devastating epidemic, but I get to work with people who I really admire, and General Price is one of those people.
Well, I can understand that. But General Price, we're going to turn to you now. You had a personal reason for getting involved, I believe. Your journey to fight drugs began, I think, when you lost your best friend to crack addiction or crack cocaine.
Yeah, he really started his exposure to crack cocaine was my last semester in college at the University of Houston. And, all I knew to say to him then, and I could see that he was starting on a bad path, but all I knew to say was what Nancy Reagan had gave the nation, just say no. And obviously that wasn't a good strategy to counter addiction. And so 30 years into the military, at age 53, he died 5 days before his 53rd birthday.
Oh, sad.
And I retired 7-8 months later, and CADCA was the place that I wanted to be to help others who were similarly suited to Carl. And so, and I learned so much, James, since that time. Like when Carl died, when Carl was addicted 30 years, I really thought it was a moral failing. And I, like his parents, his siblings, asked, was it more that we could have done? We didn't know that it was a disease, much like diabetes, that it could be treated.
It's a common story, isn't it?
It is. It is a common story now. Yeah.
Now, you, I believe you said at one time that 2/3 of the people abusing drugs never had a prescription.
That's exactly right.
So where are they getting these substances?
So they're getting them from their medicine cabinets at home. They're getting it from their grandparents who are in hospice care, and those medicines, when people die, those medicines still remain. They need to be disposed. And so they're getting it from what do you call these things that doctors give out? Samples.
Oh, samples, right. And there are so many. I mean, and every drug rep that comes in
just
exactly loads
right.
them with samples. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And my wife's dad was a pharma rep, and so he had, medicines, pretty readily available, even on his person as he's going around selling to all these doctors' offices. And so it's and by the way, they're getting them from friends, they're buying them. They're getting them from all kinds of people, but again, they're not getting them from pharmacies, and that's the issue that we're really dealing with. Is that people are not getting these drugs from pharmacies, and if you're not getting it from a pharmacy, you really run risk of a pill that's laced with fentanyl, and so it's a really dangerous environment right now.
Very dangerous, and it continues.
Exactly.
Let's provide our listeners with a basic understanding of CADCA, which stands for Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America.
Well, and we're changing it.
You are?
That was the original CADCA. Yeah, we're doing what we call a brand refresh because the anti-drug piece it's latent with stigma, and so we've moved away from that, and now our name is CADCA, but the initials, the acronym stands for something different. It stands for who we are and what we do. And so it's a community-based, advocacy-focused, data-driven, coalition-building association.
And that's a mouthful. So you stick with CADCA, right?
We'll stay with CADCA, exactly.
So anyway, your organization, and these questions are for both you and Mary as well, but you serve 5,000 communities, which are a lot of communities. But I'm aware of your platform. If we can delay first use or misuse of drugs, we can prevent our youth from becoming addicted. I believe that's one of your platforms, if I'm correct.
Right, that's correct.
And so perhaps both of you can chime in and give us some perspectives on how CADCA, what's the purpose and how you approach this.
Yeah. Mary,
you want me to start?
You want me to start? All right,
Sure, go ahead. After you.
So James, you might remember a standout basketball player in the late 80s named Lenny Bias. He was University of Maryland. And it was Lenny. Lenny was the number 2 overall draft pick by the Boston Celtics, the number 2 guy to go in that year's pick. And he was to be the heir apparent for Larry Bird. Well, Lenny went up to Boston, signed his contract, came back to the University of Maryland. I don't know how he ingested cocaine, but it caused his heart to explode. And Lenny's death, as tragic as it was really the catalyst for George H.W. Bush to start a task force to look at the crack cocaine epidemic that was happening in inner cities around our country.
And that was in the 80s, right?
That was in the late 80s.
Right.
Yeah. But the task group met for 3 years. And then in 1992, they did the outbrief to the president. And that outbrief, in that outbrief was born this organization known as CADCA, originally the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. And it moved from a slogan or a program like DARE or like Just Say No to a evidence-based, community-based coalition building endeavor with 12 sectors in the coalition. That's kids serving organizations, parents, media, law enforcement, clergy. 12 sectors would come together and sit at the table to breathe life into what would be called a community coalition, community-based coalition. And we have 5,000 in the United States, and then we have another 530 countries around the world.
Right. I'm going to get into that in a bit because that's quite interesting if you serve other countries in the world. But 5,000, I mean, is it just spread across the country? Are there particular areas that you focus?
They're almost every community across our nation, and they're urban, they're rural, they're frontier, they're tribal. You name the community, every demographic, we have coalitions involved. And we see that as really the sustainable model for our country to get out of this overdose death epidemic. And I know we'll talk about the opioid settlement.
Right. I'm definitely going to get into that.
Yeah.
So, Mary, what's your perspective on this?
Look, I've seen it in action, and I'm even trying to organize a coalition in my hometown now, which is in rural Colorado. The beauty of this is not prescribed by CADCA telling a community what to do. The community is given tools by CADCA and science and evidence and best practices and suggestions for how they might go about their work. But the coalition itself comes up with the issues, comes up with the solutions, figures out, like where I come from, I'm very close to New Mexico, which opioids aren't as much a problem as is methamphetamine. So we just give the tools and the collaboration. We foster collaboration. What I love, it is not a top-down heavy approach, cramming it down, but it's born of the communities coming up to us. And I tell you, CADCA does 2 big events every year with over 3,000 attendees. And the passion for what they do, the excitement, the talent that CADCA brings in. I hope, Barrye, you get to talk about a couple of our youth speakers that we had at our drug-free kids dinner this year. But that's the beauty. And as a member of Congress too, I loved community-oriented solutions. I hated us telling them how to do their work when they know best how to do their work. So that's this successful model and why I'm excited about it and passionate about it. And in my hometown, we have an active chief of police. We have an active behavioral health company who's doing things. They created a ride-along program, and I'm so pleased to support this, but when the police are called out to some sort of a call that might not be violent or or an accident or anything, but is maybe drug related, they have a behavioral health specialist right along with them, along with the police officer who goes to handle the problem. And to me, this sort of warm approach diffuses a lot of the situation and the stigma. So this is one of our community's approaches to solving the problem and to handling it. And it's an idea of an incubator of great ideas that can come forward and do a lot of great good.
So I think you're saying the idea was born from the community itself, as opposed to you saying, this is what we think you should do.
That's exactly right. And what we provide them, each community, a master's level of education on the art and science of prevention. And we teach them over the course of a year, some in-person learning, some in asynchronous learning, where the community will do work. They'll develop their own logic model, based on an assessment of their own community. They'll build capacities in their own community. And one of the things that we're proudest of is that all of our solutions are culturally competent based on that particular community. And so we do our trainings in 9 different languages as well.
Well, that's interesting. Now, but tell us a little bit about the training aspect of it, how you really get into the training. As a matter of fact, Mary, I had before we actually get into depth there, I had a question for you. I listened to one of your interviews, and I'm going to read my notes here. You stated in the interview that you want parents and children to know the signs of drug use and addiction. So can you tell us some of the signs that you're asking parents to look for?
Sure, James. And again, as Barry's saying, this whole epidemic has changed. It's morphed into the fentanyl issue, which is there's no longer room for error. But look, when we were kids, there was the sniff check. We would come home and your parents would smell if you'd been drinking or smoking or something, and they knew, and then you'd probably be in trouble. But then it became when pills hit the scene, courtesy of Purdue Pharma, you didn't have that. The parents didn't have that ability. You notice my son or my daughter's a little bit off, but I don't understand what's happening. And so it was a culture shift and having to realize, first of all, to have the conversation with your kids, especially now in the era of fentanyl. We have to talk to our kids about the dangers. This isn't partying any longer. This is very risky behavior. And it's hard to get that across to folks. And it's hard to have, the talk. When we were kids, the talk meant something entirely different. But now this talk and trying to understand and figure out, gee, my child is showing signs that just don't add up to me. They don't make sense. And look, the number 1 and 2 tools I think of for prevention in the family are love and understanding. And I think if you approach your child with those 2 and try to talk through this, it's the greatest beginning you can have. But then I also advocate, if you do notice your child is engaged in some risky behavior, for me, it was very important to bring in a professional. I used to say, when you go in the delivery room, they never give you the manual on how to raise a child.
Right.
But there certainly is no manual on how to raise, or there wasn't 10 years ago, how to help a child struggling with.
So what kind of professional do you bring in?
A therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist. Actually, we brought in a marriage and family therapist, psychologist, who helped me a lot. Because the rules of parenting, look, if your child has a disease like asthma or a cancer, God forbid, you know what to do, and your peers and your family and your friends know what to do and how to help. But with any substance use disorder, they don't know what to do. The rules are different and the support is different. And as Barry's mentioned, even today, we've done so much in getting away from the stigma, but there's still so much stigma there. And it interferes. And this notion, gee, your kid is messed up, your kid. So fighting through that oftentimes you need peers. Peers are going through it too. And you need a professional. For me, that was a marriage and family therapist.
Interesting.
And James, I'd like to add a couple of things to what Mary said too, as well, because it really spurned on some great thoughts. When I was a child, my dad would always say, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future." That's not the case anymore. Because this pandemic or epidemic is not just affecting the bad kids or other people's kids. It's every neighborhood in America now. It's blue blood all-American kids who are suffering from this epidemic. And so it's not those guys anymore. So it's
what do
harder.
you think is causing them to get involved? I mean, what is it because everyone else is doing it and they want to try it and then they get hooked? Or are there other factors involved?
Well, I think there are several factors. One is the science of the brain, that we started this conversation about CADCA'S mission to delay first use until the brain is fully formed until after age 26. Then it significantly decreases the likelihood that you'll become addicted. And kids are experimenting, but they're not. I don't believe they endeavor to become drug addicts. I think they experimented, and then there is this chemical reaction, and then that body then asks for those drugs again and again and again. I think too we have some. There are some tools now, because it's more difficult to discern. The sniff test. You can't sniff a pill, right?
No, you can't.
And so the piece that there are some things that some of our partners have developed, like a child's room that's designed to show parents how to go through your child's room when they're not present.
Now, this is part of your training program, I'm assuming.
Part of our training program, and you can
Okay.
see something as simple as a highlighter, or where kids can use this as a tool for drugs, or a place to hide drugs, or a Coke can with a hollowed out bottom, that they can put the bottom back on it. The can openers now don't open the can like usual, right? With the serrated edges over it. No, it takes the whole top off of it.
And
So
if you're
now
a
you can-
kid, you like to do new innovative things that you might tell your friends, look how I'm hiding my drugs.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so parents have to be more skilled, at walking through their kids' room or being in a kid's space. There's a partner we also have called Operation Parent, who shares insights and equips parents with tools that they can utilize to best help their kids. And these are not designed to be intrusive. They're really designed to be self-help tools for parents that they might help their kids.
And James,
So,
if I can add to this too, the other game changer is social media. And I'm not trying to pin this on them or blame them for anything, but it certainly makes it a lot easier for kids to get drugs. And we've all heard the stories about a young 12-year-old who went on one platform and was able to have some drugs delivered to his house, and subsequently he overdosed and died. Let me change that. He was poisoned and he died. I think this is important to recognize with fentanyl. These people are not intentionally overdosing, they're being poisoned.
So fentanyl is a poison. We should look at it that way then.
Well, fentanyl's both. Look, and by the way, there is a therapeutic clinical use for fentanyl, and there has long been.
Well, right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But now it of course, is a man-made opioid, and it has jumped the shark here, and now it is sort of the drug that is out there and that is lacing things. And as Barrye said, these are good kids. The kids are going off to college now. These good kids, and they're cramming for an exam. And somebody offers them Adderall. And if you just take this Adderall, you can stay up all night and party. I mean, you can and study and, prepare.
In my day, it was no dose, but that's a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. And, but nowadays they think that it's Adderall. So the other thing working against us, in my opinion, are the cartels. There is a deliberate international sort of narco trafficking problem here that we are up against. And in my opinion, the government is not taking it nearly seriously enough. I actually sponsored, signed a letter with a whole bunch of other folks about declaring fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction. So I think it needs to, rise to that level of importance, and the government needs to focus on it. I don't know how many people we need to lose next year for them to take it that seriously, but it's going to be too many. I'll tell you this, with Barrye and myself, we know probably 20, 25, 30 parents right now we can name by first names who have lost a child. And what breaks my heart is that next year at this time, we're probably going to know 25 to 30 new sets of parents. And that's what gives us,
sad.
It is sad. And that's what motivates us to do our work every day.
So I know that CADCA offers a number of different resources for, building drug-free communities. Can you both get into those programs, those resources?
Sure. We're best known for our National Coalition Academy, and that is run by our institute that really has the latest and greatest practices in the art and science of prevention. This is where we train our coalitions to solve their own problems through a 1-year process where there's 3 weeks of in-person learning where they will develop their own assessment tools, will develop their own logic model based on their community. It's not a build a logic model. No, it's based on research in your own community. It's where they learn how to build capacity, in their own community within those sectors. And so those sectors aren't just one deep, but it's a coalition looks like 50 to 250 people. They develop a planning model that they're going to actually execute in their communities, and the implementation plan that's associated with that. We teach them how to evaluate, to tweak what they're doing, to right size, what they're doing. And then we connect them, through our online community so they can also partner with other communities who've already faced the challenges that beset them.
That's what I was going to ask you. You actually share between the communities.
We share best practices with
stories of what is working and what is not.
Exactly. And then we do some other things, data-driven research, like a Primer series, or like our Practical Theorists, which looks at, let's take Practical Theorist number 10, looked at marijuana. And it looks at kind of the state of the union with marijuana, whether it's on the ballot for passage, whether you have medicinal use, whether you have recreational use. And here are some tools that you can do and use in your communities. Like most people don't know that their counties can opt out, even though the state has passed recreational use, counties can opt out. It gives them tools of how to deal with distributors so that you can keep it out of the hands of children. We built one on opioids. We're doing one right now on fentanyl and on methamphetamine, which are still major problems in our country. We're talking about opioids, where we lost 108,000 people in the last 12 months. But, we're still losing 95,000 people to alcohol every year, 450,000 to tobacco every year. And we're not even talking about those things. Methamphetamine is still a major problem.
Does your organization get into those other
we
items,
absolutely
alcohol
do.
And smoking?
We absolutely do. And we empower communities to do the same. And then the thing that's greatest about, and Mary mentioned, 2 of our premier training events. We have the National Leadership Forum, which is in February. It's always in Washington, D.C., and it's the who's who of people in this space from Washington, D.C. They come over and they spend a morning with us. We start with SAMHSA's Prevention Day, and then we go 3 days of us. The 3rd day is Capitol Hill Day, where lay people who are doing the work in the communities have an opportunity to meet with their members of Congress. I think this is where Mary learned about us, because her constituents are coming over to talk to her about, what's happening in the local community. And I think it's a tremendously empowering moment for not just for the lay people, our coalition people, but also for the member to see that they have passionate volunteers in the community who are doing the work, every single day. And then we kind of end with our national with our awards luncheon, where we recognize people who are doing great and wonderful things on the national level. And that's one of our trainings. And the second one is our mid-year training institute, which happens the 3rd week of July of every year. That moves around the country. So that we'll get more of a regional focus.
That's what I was wondering, if you actually have regional programs. Because obviously, for some, Washington, D.C. is a bit of a trip.
That's exactly right. And so we move that one around, and again, about 3,000 people will attend, and it's a more deeper look into these issues. So forum, because it's truncated, and you have Capitol Hill Day, you have the awards luncheon at the end of it. Those are 90-minute sessions, but these are half-day sessions and full-day sessions at the Mid-Year Training Institute. And then we have different tracks. We have one this year, we're having on mental health. We have a veteran track. We have a tribal track. All of these issues that we're talking about in our neighborhoods across the country. If you go to an Indian reservation, they are off the charts, the morbidity charts with the use on those. And so we're working with our tribal friends to help them as well. And we're developing a tribal track for this next National Leadership Forum.
And I guess, Mary, you've seen the benefits of this as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm proud to be a part of CADCA, and I can say without doubt that CADCA is the preeminent prevention nonprofit in this country, and we're poised to continue to grow. Sadly, there's a reason we have to grow, but at the same time, we are. I think that we're passionate and excited about our work. But it's not alone. Look, there are a lot of advocates like us at CADCA. There are a lot, and because of a lot of this great effort, like Barrye's talking about, going to the Hill and talking to their members of Congress, a lot of people have been doing this with or without being associated or affiliated with nonprofit. But because of that, the Congress finally, over the past decades, passed the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. 2 years, 3 years before that, they couldn't mention the word. They just were frightened, and they were staying away. And, pharmaceutical companies were threatening members to stay away from the issue. But Congress did pass that. They passed the Support Act, which followed up CARA, the Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act. And they continue to work on this. And as you know, the federal government is putting a lot of money towards this problem in itself. And, that's good to say. Finally, of course, if there's accountability and we see these numbers tick down. Sadly, before the fentanyl epidemic, we were beginning to see a change. The overdose deaths were beginning to decline. And then fentanyl hit the scene and just changed everything dramatically.
Changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, achievements, and I think you mentioned accountability, there's always a bottom line. And can you both perhaps share some success stories that you've had to get to that bottom line that CADCA's been able to more or less put forth? Any thoughts?
I would tell you that one of our proudest moments comes from a community, Carter County, Kentucky. Carter County, Walmart wanted to build a store, and they couldn't find 250 people who could pass a urinalysis test.
Oh my goodness.
250 people. And we built the coalition in Carter County. And now it's their drug use decreased by 90% in their high school students. It's now one of the model. They went from a 23% graduation rate to a 97% graduation rate in high school. They do have a Walmart now as well, James. And there are all kinds of stories in every demographic, like Carter County within CADCA's portfolio. And we get to evaluate. We do an evaluation every year. And so we get to see the data because, again, we are a evidence-based, data-driven organization. And that's the piece and oh, by the way, $125,000 is what it costs to have a drug-free community. $125,000. It's the most successful program for the least amount of money that's on record in our country right now.
So is that per community? If a community is going to get involved, you're looking at about 125,000.
They have to compete for it, and it's a very competitive process. And the Congress has allocated about $100 million annually to build new drug-free communities, and it's the best program for the value across our country.
So that brings me to an important aspect, and I'll give you a little bit of background to my question. This past July, Pennsylvania's Attorney General Josh Shapiro announced a $26 billion settlement with Johnson & Johnson and 3 of the pharma distributors for use in the opioid problem. Now, I know the money is going to be shared with thousands of communities throughout America. And I'm going to ask you both, I want to tell you a bit of a story first, but I want to ask you both if money is that answer to this crisis. But before you respond, I want to share an example. Mary, you talked about your community. I live in a community in North Carolina. It's a small community, but the local government recently announced, our Board of Commissioners, that they're going to receive $6.2 million of this settlement. And here's the kicker. This is what I'm really interested in. The president of the board stated, and I'm going to quote, "The funding will be helpful. However, it doesn't do anything to stop the problem. And it's become very clear lately, we've been having a lot more deaths due to overdose. So our board adopted a resolution calling for the state legislature to demand better border patrol by federal authorities to control the trafficking of opioids." So I guess I'm asking both of you, is money an answer to this problem, or is it somewhat insignificant to the overall what you really need to do as a community?
It's hugely important. Money is a huge part of the solution. I hate to say that. I wish it didn't take money to solve problems, but it does. There's been work ongoing by the Johns Hopkins Institute to make sure that there are safeguards on the funding so that it's not going to fix potholes or to do things. And we learned that lesson from watching the tobacco settlement dollars get squandered away.
Right, exactly.
But, it is a big part of it. And there are many things that this can go to, many things. And, I look, border security is probably part of it, but it's not all of it. And the fact that we need to do all we can to lower demand, to lessen demand, to get people to quit wanting these drugs and requesting them. First of all, we can do that. So for a county commissioner to put it on the southern border is not enough. And I agree with him, it's not enough. Yes, we ought to be securing our northern border as well. I mean, the bad guys are going to find holes. I actually stood on what they call a semi-submersible submarine down in Colombia that traffickers were using to smuggle drugs up the Pacific coast and bring them into California via the sea. So, the bad guys are going to find a way, and we have to do all we can. And yes, we are not doing enough, but we also have to do everything we can to strengthen our communities and to strengthen our families and to shore us up. There's no doubt. There's a lot of things we can do in that regard. Even providing naloxone to reverse an overdose, or if it's a poisoning from fentanyl, naloxone will work on that.
Now, what do you mean by naloxone?
Naloxone Naloxone is an opioid overdose reversal medication. The easiest one to administer is a nasal spray. So if somebody is in fact overdosing or is overdosed, you can use this nasal spray and revive them to reverse that overdose. And then the thinking is, of course, if you can reverse that overdose, the next thing is a warm handoff into treatment. This was the wake-up call. Hopefully they're going to now go in and seek the treatment that they need so that it doesn't happen again. Is it foolproof? No. If it's your family member, it's all you got. So that's one example. Just prevention messages. You ask, advocacy is interesting. And I learned this in Congress. I used to tell people, when you're not in my door telling me what I ought to be doing, somebody else is. So if the only messages kids are getting are, oh, look at this rainbow fentanyl. It's fentanyl designed to look like Skittles. I mean, we need to counter those messages. And that's a huge part of this, because we did stop doing that. We stopped talking about how bad this is. Same with tobacco. It's just stupid. So there's prevention, there's overdose prevention, overdose reversal. There's drug disposal that we ought to be focusing on. When you're done with those drugs that are in your medicine chest, be safe, dispose of them in an environmentally safe, friendly way, and get rid of them.
Excellent suggestion.
Yeah. And if it's not you, we have a friend who talks about his parents' end of life, that after his mom passed, he went into a bathroom and had the whole drawer filled with end of life medications. We've got to do something responsible with that. Flushing them is not the way to go, but there are environmentally friendly, safe ways to get rid of those drugs and keep them out of the hands of people who don't need them. So I can go on and on. Of course, rehab. There are not enough recovery and rehabilitation facilities in our country. In my community, we're working hard to establish one, and it takes funding to do that. And it's my hope that as we do spend this money, not only do we attack the problems of today, but we build a lasting infrastructure for the future. And maybe today's opioids and fentanyl is tomorrow's who knows what.
Exactly. There's always
yeah.
something new coming into the
Something on the
market.
horizon. That's
Is
exactly right.
CADCA going to be able to benefit from some of these monies that are going into the local communities, or is it a totally separate thing?
Yeah, so I tell you that benefit is probably not a good word that I would use, but CADCA is a part of the counteroffensive that can help empower communities to solve their own problems. We just went through a major analysis with my board, that Mary is the chair of, where we looked at all communities across the United States, and it looks like we have more like closer to 7,000 coalitions.
Really?
Only a fifth of them are current members of CADCA, which means that they're receiving technical assistance, they're receiving support, that they're receiving the latest and greatest in our evidence-based documents. And so one of the things that I'm offering, that CADCA is offering as kind of a low-cost solution is, let's get all of these dormant coalitions, let's reactivate them. Because when you look at the heat map around the state, they really blanket the breadth and width of each of the states. And if we get those coalitions back empowered and level set them through our 2 training events with a national, with a statewide academy, and bring them into our online community where they can engage with each other, I believe that's going to be a phenomenal part of the solution, sustainable solution towards solving and bringing these communities back online so that they can solve their own problem. Again, every community is very different. The drugs that are there. And one of the things that Mary and I know is, once you build a coalition and that coalition is effective and collaborative, you can overlay it on any scourge in the community. It doesn't have to just be illegal illicit drugs, underage drinking, and cessation of all use of tobacco, which is our primary focus. You can overlay it on hazing and bullying. You can overlay it on suicide within that community, because you have all the right players at the table, the decision makers at the table to be a part of the solution.
I think that's a very important
players,
point that you're making, that basically your program really goes beyond just the drug aspects of it. It goes into the alcohol, the smoking, the bullying, and all of these things that are happening to teenagers that obviously affects their lives so seriously. That's a good point that you bring up. Now, I'm curious because, and you alluded to it earlier, CADCA is involved internationally, and I believe in some 28 countries, if I'm correct.
30 countries.
30 countries now. So how do these partnerships, do they help us here in the United States in terms of combating our problems? I think Mary alluded to it, drugs coming into our country. And is that part of what your goal is?
I would tell you, James, from my seat, I learned more from international coalitions that we can apply domestically than the other way. Many of these countries are all international narcotics and law enforcement countries throughout the State Department. These are countries where there are drug cartels, not just somebody selling, weed on the corner or pills. These are cartels, and so they're very dangerous environments. And these communities, they're learning through our self-help model to solve their own problems, and they have gotten the government involved to be a part of their solution. And so I tell you that we have now begun fusing in our training, especially at mid-year, where our domestic coalitions can attend the international track. And they're learning tremendous things, because it's not just, one guy on the corner. It's a cartel, which is very, very dangerous, different skill set that they have. And I tell you that the involvement internationally with governors, I speak to more governors internationally than I do domestically. I speak to more mayors internationally than I do domestically.
That's interesting.
I speak more to more police chiefs internationally than I do domestically. So they have a whole different array of people who would seemingly be too busy to do coalition work, but they're at the table internationally.
So we have a listening audience, a fairly good sized listening audience. And so my question is, what can we do to help? In other words, how can we get our listeners involved to help your program, what you're trying to do to aid and support you? Any ideas from either of you?
Sure. Thank you. And again, this is one of those problems that people don't know about until it's too late. I think anytime we can share about this coalition model and what CADCA does, part of my frustration in our world, the advocacy world, is watching nonprofits compete against each other or reinvent the wheel. So I'd rather see somebody come into the field who's already done their research and figured out what best practices are, what is tried, what is working, and sort of skip the training wheels time, because we don't have the luxury of that time any longer. So I would just raise awareness about CADCA, that we exist. Again, if you see the excitement on people's faces, on local people's faces, the county sheriff and chief of police and business owners, small business owners, they come together, and this gives them hope. It gives them tools to actually respond to this crisis, and also, again, build a long-lasting infrastructure for future problems. So I'd hope that you could just help us raise the awareness that we're here. Again, people love to ignore things until it's too late. But in this case, the more we talk about, hey, there's a solution. Let's create a coalition. It's in your community's mind, not ours. You bring the people to the table. You bring the talent to the table. You bring the businesses to the table, and the law enforcement, and teachers, parents. You bring them to the table, and we'll tell you what's working so far, and let's get going. So I think that would be number one.
All right. So I mean, basically, I suppose it depends on the community, but there may be some communities, we're across the United States, where our listeners, there isn't an active, or shall we say, correlation between the community and CADCA. They can perhaps inspire to get this going, or see what they can do. Or if there is let's say, a coalition in the community, join it, see what they can do individually to help things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they can reach out to us at CADCA.org, www.CADCA.org, and we can tell them who's in charge of their local coalition. But that's first, as Mary is saying, I would ask them to get involved. Two, I would ask them to become members of our organization. Three, if they don't have a domestic coalition, I would ask them to focus on building one, and we can certainly help them with that. To ask the deeper questions of their young people. We just had one of our board members to share a harrowing tribute to her son, who died in 2017 from an overdose. And as she filmed a piece for him, as she looked at the pictures, she could see in his eyes that he was in trouble now, in retrospect, but not then, because no parent really wants to face it. And so we need to become smarter on what our children are doing, and things like, and CADCA can help with like virtual who's in the room, what's in your child's room tours. We can help with that, but we need to ask deeper questions. We need to be a part of other people's solutions as well. We can't say, well, it's not my child. I would tell you, though the light is still dormant and not lots of people know about it, it's every street in every neighborhood in America has somebody who's suffering from active addiction that perhaps maybe no one knows about.
And I think the sad part is it's growing. It's not declining, but it's growing, exactly, even in our own community. That's what I mentioned about our Board of Commissioners. I mean, exactly, we realize it's growing in our community, which is kind of ironic, because we're not theoretically that type of community, but it happens. Exactly. It happens more often than it should. I do want to remind our listeners that all the information about CADCA, the community, and I know your name is changing, so I won't repeat the long form of it, but it can be found on our website, jamespolakof.com. Now, this includes, we're going to include CADCA's website, any links that the two of you would like to send us. We're going to include that on our website so that our listeners, who go regularly to the website to find information can find information, how to get to you, how to ask questions, how to become involved. Do either of you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share? I want to make sure we've covered everything that we should have.
Well, James, I can start by giving you my gratitude. Voices like yours that help us magnify and amplify what we're doing and bringing this experience to people who aren't aware of it and can actually step up and be a part of the solution. You know, I'm a little frustrated by your county commissioner because you cannot kick this can down the road.
Exactly. I agree with you. That's why I brought it up.
Well, thank you. I like when people bring up things I'm going to agree with. Makes it a lot easier. But you can't. I mean, and yes, the border is a part of it. Okay, great. But that's not in his purview. He needs to focus, all of our local elected officials need to focus on what they can do, the tools that they have and the responsibilities that they're given by being elected.
Or else we're going to find the money going into other areas, not the areas where it should be going. I see that happening in local communities.
Well, I hope you hold them accountable. But I just
I will. And my neighbor will too, who's running for the board, but that's beside the point.
Go neighbor. But we do want to thank you because you helping us to spread the word of what we do. You know, over the years, I've been doing this since 2007, focused on this work. And the media and responsible journalists are a huge part of the solution. And I know they generally like to stay out of the solution, but in this case, they are a part of it.
Yeah.
By spreading the issues, by spreading the problems, by spreading the solutions. So I just want to thank you very much for having Barrye and myself on. And I know you and I've got a long story of connection way back when.
Way back when
When we were 12. But I just want to say thank you so much for shedding light on this.
All right. Well, it's my pleasure. And I want to thank you both, Mary Bono, the Honorable Mary Bono, General Price, and thank you again for your service, General. I mean, what you're doing now, both of you, what you're doing now is so important. I mean, it just shows that regardless of, you were very active in Congress, Mary, but you're still out there doing the important things that need to be done. Both of you are. So I want to compliment you on that. We just need more like you in this country. And I think that politics doesn't need to be divisive. It can be inclusive if we all work together. So that's part of my message, at least. But I want to thank you both for being part of this. It's so important to get this word out, and we'll do everything we possibly can to help you as well.
And James, could I get a parting shot in
Please.
as well? One, I want to echo Mary and thanking you for this opportunity to illuminate this very important and critical topic, especially at a time like this. I want to remind your listeners of two things that Mary said. One is that we all have a part to play, and we can do that in disposing of our excess medicines with safe in-home safe disposal kits. Second is that we all need to be to understand how to use naloxone, Narcan, this overdose reversal drugs, because we all are empowered to save other people's lives. And then finally, if your community, your state has opioid settlement dollars, reach out to CADCA. We have some great low-cost solutions that communities can utilize to get themselves well, and we're poised and positioned to help every community get well.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you both so much for joining us, and I'll be right back in a moment after this message.
Want to discover more information about opioid addiction and CADCA, as well as what you can do to help? Simply visit our website, jamespolakof.com. That's James, Polakof.com. You'll also discover a variety of valuable resources on our website and other terrific Body, Mind, Soul podcast episodes. Again, jamespolakof.com. Now back to Dr. Jim.
Thanks again to the Honorable Mary Bono and General Barrye Price for joining me to discuss the challenge of opioid addiction and drug addiction itself, in addition to possible solutions. Now remember, you can help. So come to our website where you can access more information and see what you can do to get involved in this battle. It's an important fight. Join us. Our production coordinator, Faith Michelle, is absolutely correct. Our Discovering New Horizons website contains an amazing amount of valuable information, resources, and a number of other great Body, Mind, Soul podcasts. Plus, we certainly welcome your comments, so keep those emails and suggestions coming to our website. We want to know what you want. Again, we invite you to visit jamespolakof.com. This is Dr. Jim Polakof. Until the next episode, thanks for listening.